Howdy friends, I'm Phil Zio from One Wall Studio, and I'm here to demonstrate and review the uses for Audio Assault's newest VST plugin, Amp Simulation, known as Dominator. Now, Dominator is cool and differentiates itself from the other Audio Assault plugins by giving you a range of different pedals to choose from pre-amp signal. So you get a boost pedal, a tube screamer emulation, a compressor, a distortion pedal, a chorus, a tremolo, a doubler, a delay, a reverb, and an auto-wah. So that's something that their previous amp sims, like Grind Machine and Bass Grinder, did not have, with the exception of one thing known as the Gent Box. So, what else is new with Dominator? Firstly, it's a 2-channel amp, which they've never really had before. With Grind Machine, you just had a choice of different amp models that all emulated one channel of a specific amp that was on display. So it was like, you could choose an Angle amp, or a Mesa amp, or a number of different amp models, but they were all pretty much just the high gain channel. Here, you have the choice between channel B and channel A. Now, difference between the two is this is channel B, and now channel A. So one thing you'll notice immediately is that channel A has a much more warm sound, a lot thicker, and that may just be because it sounds like it's trying to emulate the sound of a Mesa or a Marshall in style, whereas channel B sounds distinctly more Angle-like to me. And it has a presence knob, which channel A does not have. Now, the difference between the two when you're on high gain, like I have it dimed right now, isn't that crazy, with the exception of the different mid-ranginess. But if you lower the gain significantly to like noon, for example, you'll find that it gets significantly crunchier, significantly higher gain, much quicker on channel B. Whereas with channel A, you really need to crank it to get that same level of gain. You'll find that up next you have a cab section where you can move the microphone, so to speak, in front of this virtual emulated cabinet. And you have the choice of either going for a British 4x12, an American 2x12, a Japanese 2x12, or a German 4x12. And I, for the rhythm tone here, really like the Japanese 4x12. As you move the mic, it really changes the tone a lot. I really like how it responds to that a lot more than Amplitude. And while we're on the topic of this section, you've got a distance knob, a high pass, and a low pass filter. I really don't have the high pass and low pass doing much except cutting a little bit off of each end. And the distance knob is nothing, because if you crank that, it sounds a little bit too convincingly like you're pulling it far away. You go from like a foot, from a couple inches away to like a foot away to almost like you're in a different room at this point. So be careful how much you turn that knob. Anyhow, the other thing you'll note is that they have an option of different microphones, but it doesn't change the appearance of this, unlike in other things like Amplitude. But you do still get nice mic models, so you get like a Sennheiser 421, Royer R121, a condenser T1. Here's the ribbon, nice fat, and a 57, which sounds just as much like a 57 as you would expect it to. I personally like the 421. A little bit lower on the cone. And another thing that's really important to notice is that you have a built-in gate. So you don't need to add any other plugins for the gate. You've got one right here, and it responds relatively well, like you'd expect a gate in metal to react very quickly and I don't really have much use for a gate across here, except during the chorus section. You feel that really quick attack and not so quick release. It sounds really good, in my opinion, for what it's worth. So, putting that in context, feels really bright so far. So, what I did was I actually changed the EQ curve right after that a little bit. Normally, I'd go to brighten up a tone ever so slightly, but in this instance, I felt the need to cut a little bit of the brightness, low pass it a little bit more, increase the 8K, but only a little bit, really, just to make up a little bit for the 4K that was cut, and then boost the mids, and like the high mids especially. So, and to get a feeling for what that sounds like. Really gets rid of a lot of that woofiness while still maintaining that nice thicker bottom end. And I also added a tape emulation plugin just so I could saturate it and control the dynamics a little bit. And then I use finality, which is really just being used to kind of throttle it, keep it a consistent dynamic level. And then I have a sidechain compressor set to react from the keyed input of the lead guitar track. Now, the lead guitar track is its own monster over here. There's really not a ton I'm doing to it, so let's just go to the part where the lead plays. You'll notice right away I have a lot more effects on this one. So this I have set with a mid-gain in the B channel, a lot more bass, a lot more mids, and cranked just about every channel into the German 412, which is probably trying to get an angle cab sound, and the condenser T1. Very bright tone, right up against that cap. So going right into it, I have a Tube Screamer emulation set to noon on the tone, cranked a little bit of the gain and a little bit of the drive. And then I have the compressor, which I can't really hear a lot of what this compressor is doing. The attack and release are relatively quick, but let's see if you can determine that with compressor. Without. It honestly just feels like it's bringing it up in your face a little bit more. The effects of this particular device, I'm not extremely happy with. So like when the delay is enabled, it doesn't sound stereo. It feels like it's really mono, really gets in the way, doesn't have like a tone option to really cut down on a lot of the high end that's there, which when I put a delay on leads, I tend to cut down on the high end of the delay itself so that it doesn't step all over the articulation of the lead. That's kind of a problem. I also had a lot of the same problem with the reverb unit that they had, which I guess is either trying to be like a Fender tone, like a deluxe amp reverb or a Hall of Fame reverb, but I don't really think it convincingly does either. So listen to how it sounds without and then with. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of how that sounds going through the amp, especially because there's a lack of a convincing low gain channel. In my opinion, it sounds kind of cheesy. Not amazing, but I will say that the doubler is much better than either of these two effects. And the chorus also sounds pretty good comparatively. So, chorus first. So while not an amazing effect, I think the chorus is pretty passable. And the tremolo, I honestly don't even really hear it all that much. Listen to what I mean. Unless you set it on a really low speed and a high depth, it suddenly disappears. You have to set it to like 100 to be noticeable. But it's a decent tremolo, for what it's worth. I just don't think it's the best in the world. I think Podfarm probably had a better one. And I don't even like Podfarm. Anyway, on to the doubler. This thing is my favorite part of the whole... Oh yeah, it really fattens it up, gives it that, like, Van Halen 5150 style. The only convincingly stereo effect in this whole thing. Really helps the leads stand out, and it makes me wish that I'd used a doubler on a lead channel before this, to be completely honest. Anyway, on to the next thing that I used Dominator for, which you're probably going to find this to be a little bit silly, but when I split my bass track for a metal song especially into two different tracks, one being for a deeper sub 250 hertz bass track known as the deep in my tracks, and one that goes above 250 hertz only, and I cranked a little bit there at like 1.2K, known as the grind track. You'll hear, this is the deep. Really fat and lovely. But I also have a grind track, which I have Dominator on. So for this one, I actually used the Tube Screamer again into the first channel, channel A, into the American 4x12 cab with a 57. I don't even really like 57s, but for this tone, it really worked. So I cranked the treble, cranked the mids, and have a little bit of bass. Combined with the other, and compressed together. You get a nice tight but thick bass tone that sits really well under the guitars. So combine that with a little bit of EQ. And you get a little bit more of a scooped, less in-your-face brightness to it, and you still get that little bit of crunch in the background, and it really lends itself to being a part of the whole thing. So listen with and without the grind. With. Without. With. Without. It could sound good either way, but I think that having this grinding track there really adds to something. So you can move this around all you want. When you do, the cloth grill disappears, and you can just kind of move the mic so that as if you were looking at the cones directly, which is really helpful. I like that a lot. Some things like Amplitude only give you an indicator that you're right above a speaker, just like kind of faded out, and especially on screens that are far away or have a huge resolution, that's not helpful, but this really does help make a difference. Honestly, I didn't know I wanted that in an amp sim until I got it. with this. Listening to all that in perspective, you can get this feel that this song is really, really crunchy, really punchy in your face. So is Dominator worth it? Honestly, I got it for 24 bucks, and I think it's really worth it, especially when you can get tones like this, kind of like almost early metalcore tones, while still not really breaking the bank. It's cheaper than a lot of things. It definitely feels a little bit cheaper than like Tone Forge, for example, but it still feels, in all honesty, more expensive, even with fewer items, like different IRs for the cabs and different mics. It has fewer combinations, so to speak, than Grind Machine did, but it's still really good. And you can actually use a custom IR or turn off an IR entirely to hear just how the amp works, and then using an external IR loader. And it comes with a whole bunch of really good IRs by default that come at the expense of not being able to move the microphone anymore. Personally, I like the modern 412, the raunchy, the big fat grinder, and the glass 412. But, all in all, that's up to you what you do with it. Oh yeah. So now that you've heard that and what every individual component can do, it's really interesting, and the final verdict that I'd say is it limits your capabilities ever so slightly with few controls, a lack of a volume knob unless you're going for overall output volume, so gain staging's weird. The compressor and some of the pedals I could honestly do without. The compressor really doesn't do a ton. It really just brings up a little bit, and it doesn't have nearly the attack or a feel that I thought it would. And other than the screamer, the distortion, and the auto wah, which I'll just toss this on right now so you can hear what it sounds like. Which, that can be really cool for solos, don't get me wrong. The screamer, the distortion, and the boost, which is honestly just a gain pedal, so it kind of helps with the whole input gain thing, but the lack of meters of any kind doesn't really. I know I could just use the individual channels, but I don't always know how much gain the actual plugin that I'm running it into wants, what a healthy level is for it, etc. So if this was updated with some meters, with maybe a stereo option for some of the pedals, and volume knobs for the individual amp channels, that would be perfect. But other than that, I think it's a great sounding amp sim. You can do a lot with relatively little tweaking. I just cut a little bit of low mid, boosted a little bit of high mid, cut a little bit of 4K because screw 4K, and boosted, you know, around 8K. And with all those tweaks, you get a really tight tone that sits in the mix really well, even at really high gain levels. So I ask, what more could you ask for? And with that, my review is over. I'm going to finish this up with the song that I'm mixing here with just this, just for the sake of the review. And let me know in the comments whether you liked it, if there's anything else you want me to check out, and if you have any other pieces of advice for Audio Assault. I know they make some really nice products that I like, products that I've used for a long time. I've literally bought everything I possibly can from them. I mean, I trust the company that much, almost as much as I trust Kazrog. But yeah, it's a great product. Definitely use it, especially if you're looking for a really simple, like $25 or $30 fix. And because it comes with some of those impulses, it really does show a level of versatility that it can be used as an amp sim, as a cab sim on its own right, and has a decent amount of value built in. Are the pedals great? Not really. Could it be better? Yeah, but honestly, the tones themselves, just for the amp, the cab, and the way the mic responds, is really something that I enjoy. So, if you see it on sale like I did for $25, definitely buy it. Would I recommend it for more than that? I don't know. It depends on how much you want to spend for, one amp with 2 channels that sound not crazy different. But you can still get a good, decent amount of tonal variety out of that. And, yeah, that's about it. So, see you next time, and thanks for dropping by, friends. This has been Phil Zio from One Wall Studio.